Well, good people, friends, neighbors, brothers and sisters, thank you for hanging with me thus far. This is our 8th meeting, and we've been talking about change, and there are changes that are happening right now as we speak. And I've tried to arrange these changes according to, I guess, different categories or types or whatever you might say. We have roughly 4 more, I think, after this. But today we're thinking about changing residence. And some of you have done this fairly recently. I'm thinking about the people that I have met. Oftentimes, depending on the time of life you're in, something happens in your life. Maybe you lose a mate or some other event like that, and you're at a certain age where you like to downsize. So we'll approach that today. But when these changes occur, as we've mentioned, they're not the usual, they're not the normal, they're not things that we're accustomed to. And so for that reason, there's a certain degree of discomfort that occurs in our lives. But we as Christians look at these things, we take these things, and we use them to glorify God. Let's first look at the reasons a Christian might change his address. And we've already approached this subject when we talked about marital splits, that kind of thing. Sometimes finding a new job, we've talked about employment. A person might have financial problems, bankruptcy. Sometimes it's an act of nature, and if they have insurance, they might build back right where they are and not change address. But if no insurance, then that requires them to do something else. There are certain conditions in the current address where you are. Maybe the things that are there you're not happy with, maybe the crime. Occasionally we'll go through neighborhoods, and neighborhoods change like everything else. And so if people don't take care of their property there, maybe they get older, they can't take care of their property, the neighborhood changes, there are things that happen there. And sometimes we're just upwardly mobile. We look around one day and we say, we got a lot of money, so why are we living this hovel here? Let's move into a bigger house. And so they do that, depending on your age. And of course, in the last one up there is age. And unfortunately, we don't get younger, we get older. And at a certain age, then we have to make changes. There could be a combination of these things, but we know that God is in all our changes. And even when we think we're in control, we're not. He is. I want to look at the life of David then, in talking about this. David had a new position. You might say that he had a raise in his, I don't know whether his salary or not, but he was given a higher position. He was just a musician in the court of King Saul. But because of the circumstances there, he took a job as the king of Judah at age 30. So he asked God about where he should live. God told him to go to Hebron. So in the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah? The Lord said, go up. David asked, where shall I go? To Hebron, the Lord answered. And so David asked God, have you ever asked God where you should move? I have. And I hope you don't mind, but I might refer to my own experience. That's the thing I'm most knowledgeable in. But there came a time when the school in Louisville, Kentucky, where we were teaching, the Christian school there, didn't get enough support there, so we had to close the doors. So we began sending out our resumes, different parts of the country. We got a response from as far away as, I think, was it Arizona or someplace like that, someplace out west. We got a response from Mobile, Alabama. And so we began praying. Now, I'd like to say that our move worked out well, but like I say, God has his own things, but there was a problem even with that move, with our situation. David went up there with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. When David was told that it was the men from Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul, then he followed up on that. But David must have had happy memories of that time. He was fairly young, had 6 sons that were born in Hebron. He probably saw them take their first steps there. He could remember maybe the house or houses they lived in, the place where he worked. Maybe there were parks and fields where they gathered on special days and holidays. There was probably a place where they worshiped God, maybe in like a threshing floor or some other place dedicated to the worship of God. So many memories of his 2 wives, Ahinoam and Abigail, and their lives in Hebron. There was a picturesque town located among the mountains south of Jerusalem. He had been proud of the heritage of Hebron, formerly known as Kiriath Arba, which means the town of Arba. And if you recall, Arba was one of those giants, Anakim. And Caleb took the town of Arba from the 3 sons of Arba, who were also giants. We talked about Caleb in that regard. So Abram and Sarah were buried in a family plot there. David had a memory there of weeping at the grave of Abner, one of David's friends and Saul's commander. So there were memories there. And for people just starting out in life, and I'm saying this, although David was 30 and had been wandering around, it must have been a wonderful place, wonderful time, because he could settle down there. But it was especially good for David, since he was a vagabond. The length of time David was king in Hebron over Judah was 7 years, 6 months. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel. And if you'll know, as I read out the names of these sons, you'll recognize some of them as not turning out well, as sometimes children do. But Amnon, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel, his second, Gilead, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah, son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithream, the son of David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. Now, you might be thinking, well, I thought he just had 2 wives there. Well, I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, but obviously there was some other things going on. But these were the children that he had there, and I would imagine there were some daughters born there too. But what is it about leaving a place where you've been so long? You remember the times when visitors came and were amazed at the sites of interest there. Now, as many of you know, we lived in Cheatham County for about 17 years, and I can't say that there were sites of interest there. When we did have visitors, the only thing we could do was take them to the river there, where there's the Riverview restaurant. That's pretty impressive. But, you know, when you have people living in Nashville here, when your family comes from out of town, where do they want to go? They want to go on Lower Broadway. Well, used to be people, you didn't take people to Lower Broadway, but now I guess that's an in place. But these are the kind of things that we remember: the school, church building, the church itself, people in stores and restaurants, neighbors, people on the job. All these things were such a part of our life. Oftentimes we go to a certain place with the intention of retiring, but as we've already pointed out, God has a different idea. Your children get married in a place, and some of y'all have experienced that, where maybe you have children and grandchildren in Chicago. I know of one fellow here, and you may know who I'm talking about, who has children who are in D.C. and in Chicago, and they've traveled around. But these things happen to us as we move to different places, and we must deal with the loss. When we begin a new life, we can be disappointed with the fact that we left our old life behind, but we can either accept these things with a positive attitude, or we can dwell on these things as if something hasn't stopped, as if something hasn't gone away, as if there wasn't an end to something. And that's the problem we often have, wanting to hold on to something that is not there anymore. And so we talk about things like flexibility and resilience. And this is what we as Christians need to develop, knowing that God is with us. So all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler.'" So the people, the other people, the tribes of Israel, other than Judah, recognized that David was an impressive leader. And so they came to David, and David got a promotion, you might say. So he was anointed king over all of Israel. When all the elders of Israel had come to David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them before the Lord, and they anointed King David over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. So while the house of Saul was still active, you might say, David was king over Judah, and then later on, after Saul's house dissolved, you might say, or Abner was killed too. So David became king over the whole of Israel. David moved from Hebron to Jerusalem, and I couldn't find out any record of him asking God whether he should move or not, but this was his move to make. He accepted the promotion and realized that he would need to move his household. Hebron was no longer a place that was suitable for the king of Israel. There are 4 reasons suggested for David's choosing Jerusalem. There was a good water source there. It was safe from invasion, located centrally to the nation, and it was recognized for its religious importance. Now, can you apply that to your life? Can you apply that to the current day that we're living in? If you realize that you live in a town and the water supply is just not good. We lived in West Texas for a while, just a few short months, and the water was sulfur water. Water wasn't good there. Well, we didn't have to settle there because I was in the Army, and so we could leave. But if I lived in a place where there was sulfur water, well, I don't know whether I would just do whatever, boil it or put powder in, whatever you do to sulfur water. But, you know, the point I'm making is sometimes we leave a place because the water's not good. We want a place of safety. We don't want to live in a place where it's dangerous. Located centrally to the nation. Sometimes our job causes us to move someplace that's nearer to our work. And then, of course, we like to consider what the church is like where we're going. Now, we might translate these 4 reasons into the things that I just talked about there. And they're on the screen there. The last one will be part of the focus of this lesson. We choose a place to live near where we worship. And by the close of the lesson, I hope to bring about a comparison between Israel going into captivity and our stay here on this earth. So we'll get into that a little bit later. We might translate So it seems that nothing was easy for David. First off, he was being chased around the countryside. He had to move. He moved to Hebron, and then he had to move to Jerusalem. And we know that that wasn't the end of all his problems. He had to take Jerusalem from the Jebusites. Now, when Israel entered the land of Canaan, they failed to take the city. They defeated a group of kings, but instead of taking the city, they allowed the people to come back into the city of Jebus. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem, attacked the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, "David cannot get in here." So as the account goes, they found a way in through a place where the water supply was going in there. And again, I won't go into a lot of details there. But David captured the fortress of Zion. On that day, David had said, anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind who are David's enemies. That's why they say the blind and the lame will not enter the palace. And so he captured this fortress and moved his family there. Now, we might think of this time in David's life. He's settled into being the leader of God's people. He has older children. Maybe he has some grandchildren. But by the time he moved to Jerusalem, he had become thoroughly involved in his role as king of Israel. And he was truly a warrior king. He went in and out with the army. But came to a time in his mature age when they said, "You're no longer going to go out with us. If we lost you, it would be like losing Israel itself." He suffered many losses during his life. Family conflicts, death of children, death of friends, betrayal by those he loved. Moving was just one of those losses. Abraham is another one who made a choice after God gave him a notion to move. And I say that God gave him a notion to move because sometimes you may identify with the idea that it's almost like God plants this in your mind. And you might not move automatically, you might not start checking into these things, but that seed is in your mind. And I don't know how this came to Abraham, but it's amazing to me. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." That's what we're talking about. We're talking about being a blessing to God, about giving him glory, about giving him praise. And Abraham certainly was. It's pretty remarkable that he heard Jehovah's voice in that nation of idols, in that nation that was so steeped in the material world. Terah and his three sons, Haran, Nahor, and Abram, lived in Ur. Abram's brother Haran had died, but he had another brother, Nahor. After his father Terah died, he moved up from Ur to Canaan, the place where God told him to go. He left Nahor and his family and moved to nephew and Sarah, his wife, with him. And as you recall, if you remember the account, that was important because Nahor's family grew and developed there in Ur, in that region, Padan Aram, it's sometimes called. And then later on, part of Abraham's family went there to find a mate. So famine led him to Egypt for a while. And so his dwelling place was not set. He had to go to Egypt one time, and then he kind of moved around. But in this case, famine led him to move to a place temporarily. And it may be that you moved to a place temporarily, like we did. thinking that, well, this may be where God wants us, but no, it wasn't that way. So Abraham was kind of that way. His move was very different in at least one way. I venture to say that most people in our experience don't pack up their lives and move somewhere not knowing where they're going. I don't think I've ever done that. I've heard stories about people who one day say, well, let's just pack up our things in a U-Haul and go someplace. And so they travel to different places and they do that. The planning is a large part of the challenge in moving. Buying a house, contracting with the movers, renting a U-Haul. And by the way, I have a U-Haul story for you. I'm sure y'all do. This U-Haul had 2 perfectly good mirrors sticking out on both sides when I took it out. They were both gone when I brought it back. I think I had insurance on it, so that was good. But he didn't know where he's going. He didn't do any plans. Abram didn't need to plan since God had done all that for him. As a believer, Abram depended on God, put him where he should be. There are many things that are different about our way of life, depending on God in our moves is still important for believers. We still depend on God, but oftentimes we're not like Abraham in that we don't depend on him completely. And I'll let you decide what that means. Because, you know, we realize in the daytime that we're living in, we have to take more on ourselves to plan, even though we're depending on God. Because we know that if God doesn't want us in a place, then we know what will happen. We know that God is in control and God will be praised. We've referred to seasons of life. Several authors have written about common events and conditions that we go through as our lives unfold. In the spring, we're learning and growing. In the summer, we're using the resources and the energy, whatever we have amassed in the spring, we're using it in the summer of our life. And in the fall of our life, oftentimes, is when we start taking care of our own parents. And although the lifespans are different in his time, Abram experienced this. If you remember, caring for your parents may have been a factor that led a change of residence. In our case, it was kind of a mixture. As I said before, we usually do things for more than just one reason. But in our case, we were taking care of my mother at a certain point, and so we had to consider that. And y'all have experienced something like that, I'm sure. So a young couple keep their dog and bring a child in their lives. They plan to have brothers and sisters. This requires a more spacious place. The need to be frugal leads them to choose something that may not be what they really wanted. And so the term starter home. I don't know whether we did have a starter home. It was in East Nashville. And we didn't stay there very long. And oftentimes we accept something that we really don't want, knowing that if everything goes well, we can improve that. So the couple take what they can afford. At a time when the number of the grandchildren is growing, then later on, they're looking at downsizing. So isn't it kind of funny? You move into a little house, you move into a bigger house, maybe a bigger house still, and all the kids are gone. Grandkids are grown. So you say, well, why are we walking around in this house? I mean, you don't use most of the house, so you said, well, we're going to downsize. So these seasons of life change as they're affected by the economy, the culture, and other factors. Things change, and that brings about losses. We have to be flexible and adapt to changes. Do we do it grudgingly and become negative and hard to get along with? Or do we do it with grace and praise for God? It seems that our choices get fewer as we get older. Now, why is this? Well, we have physical limitations. We have to consider the place where we live. If it's two-story, a lot of times we'll decide, well, I can't get upstairs, so let's just find something on one floor. Change in income, we're not making as much. Children make choices, and by that time, if we get older, our children are saying, you're going to do this or that. Interests have changed. We no longer want this swimming pool. Nobody's using it. It's just taking up space. Somebody's having to take care of it. So let's move someplace else. So the expression, once a man, twice a child, is very true. This becomes true again when we get to an age when we must be dependent on our children, and this sometimes takes away our choices. Sometimes there are choices that are appealing to us at an earlier age that are no longer appealing. And that includes sometimes the place where we live. It was appealing at one time, but now it's not. There came a time when Jacob had no choice but to move from Hebron, the place he had lived for decades. Jacob moved to a different country. So Israel took his journey with all that he had, came to Beersheba, offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hand will close your eyes. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we had that same connection with God, that God would appear to us and say, you're making the right decision here. Go right on with your move. You're doing well. He met his wives in Padan Aram, as we pointed out before. For a period of time, while his children were small, this may have been his ancestral home at Hebron. But during his 147 years, he suffered much from his dishonesty. He lied to his daddy, and his mother helped him, of all things. What a dysfunctional family. They told him his son Joseph was killed by a wild animal. Later, Joseph's mother, Rachel, died while bearing his youngest son, Benjamin. We've not mentioned natural events much, but as we didn't go into detail at least, there might be a flood, a tornado, or hurricane, some other weather-related event. In 2010, were there people who lived here in Bellevue who, for some reason or other, could not build back or did not want to build back, and so they moved someplace else? It happened that in the life of Jacob, there was a famine in Canaan. His sons moved him to Egypt when, by the grace of God, they were united with their brother Joseph. What a monumental move. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own descendants, not included Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And all the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. And there were probably a lot of other servants and flocks and herds. So you can kind of imagine what that looked like, moving across country, people herding the cattle or the sheep, and then all the people with him. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. Sons of Joseph were born in Egypt. And I've already pointed out that sometimes that happens in our wanderings. Our children go someplace else, or we move someplace else. Our children get married there. Our grandchildren meet someone else there, and their roots go down deep in that place. And that happened in our family when my uncle moved to Georgia. And so his family lived in Valdosta, Georgia, most all of them. And that's a loss. It's not a loss we can't deal with, because in our day and time we can travel where we want to and visit our grandchildren, our children. But they're not with us. Joseph brought his father to Egypt. So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers, with their flocks and herds and all that they possess, have come from the land of Canaan." Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" And they said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were. Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you." Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father, stood him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" In other words, how old are you? He may have been amazed. "The days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life." Is that interesting? He's lived 130 years and he says few and evil. Well, his point of reference was other people that he knew of. His forebears had lived much longer than that. So Jacob says, "I just have been here for a few years, and I've had some pretty rough times in those days." Jacob blessed Pharaoh, went out from the presence of Pharaoh. So, coming down as we wrap this up, and I may let you go early today. As we wrap this up, I want us to consider a comparison between a move that the nation of Israel made, Israel and Judah, both taken into captivity. So, Israel's move to a foreign place. This passage of Scripture says, "By the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion." And of course, I will compare this to a move that you might have made, and it may be that you were just bereft when you had to move from a place. God had warned Israel, though, if you're disobedient, then you will be led into captivity, because there are stronger nations, and I will allow this to happen. They were disobedient to God, and so they found themselves by the rivers of Babylon, weeping as they remembered Zion. And there's a passage that says that they asked them to sing songs of Zion. And they said, "How can we sing when we're so unhappy?" Does this verse here come close to describing any of your moves? Maybe it means that the change was not by choice, but by necessity. If you'd had a choice, you would stay where you are. If you'd had a choice, your mate would not have passed away. If you had a choice, there wouldn't have been a tornado. If you had a choice, you wouldn't have lost your job. But one of those things happened, and so you had to move. It wasn't your choice, except for the place where you moved. Sometimes there's great loss that we feel like weeping. We leave familiar surroundings, supportive and loving people, a job we might enjoy, other things we're accustomed to, like schools, shopping, people that we deal in local government. Israel left these things, but they left more than these. They left beloved Jerusalem. It meant a lot to them. Now, we have a Jerusalem, and it's not Nashville. We might think of Nashville as the Jerusalem of the United States. But Nashville is not Jerusalem. In truth, our Jerusalem is wherever we are, since God is with us. And so you may have lived in Chicago, you may have lived in Virginia, and wherever you may have lived, that was where Jerusalem was, because that was where God was with you. So Israel left all of these things when they went to Babylon. But they went back into captivity. They'd been in captivity in Egypt. They went back into captivity because of their disobedience to God. So thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses, live in them, plant gardens, eat their produce. Take wives, have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons. Give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there. Do not decrease, but seek the welfare of the city where I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare, you will find your welfare. So I'm comparing this to our lives now. When I see a newborn baby, I want to ask the baby, now he's not going to talk to him, I know, don't think I'm crazy. I want to ask the baby, what was it like when you were just with God? Just a few minutes ago, you were with God. Unless maybe the spirit is in the baby before that. You know, I'm kind of being fanciful here. How was it like when you were with God? What is God like? And how do you feel about this new place where you are? I have an idea if the baby could speak, he would say it was wonderful, no pain. And here this baby is born into this world. Usually it's a cold, well, it used to be it's a cold place, but now they have these birthing rooms, so everything is okay. I always felt sorry for the baby. I think one of ours was born in a room where they had this metal thing, and of course, my wife Margie was on the thing, and it was cold in there. But now it's all different. But anyway, the baby's born into this world, and immediately kind of hit in the face with all this cold and all the things. But Israel left things that they loved. They left the city of God. They left so many things that they enjoyed. A baby is born into this world, which is a foreign place. We grow up in this world, which is a foreign place. So this is the parallel that I'm drawing. We could have discussed this move near the beginning of today's discussion. Our move to this foreign place. This world that we're in comes when we're born. In a sense, we belong to God. We might wonder where we were before we came here, and that's just what I did. But as Christians, we live in this foreign place. We tolerate conditions here because of our calling. We're called to be in the world, but not of the world. Jesus told us that we're the salt of the earth, we're the light of the world. Plainly, God wanted his people to be a blessing to the nations. And so we Christians are here in this foreign place among foreign people. And we, much like the people of God in the lands to which they were taken captive, we don't like it here. We don't like some of the things that have gone on, but we're here. For thus says the Lord, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you. I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me. When you seek me with all your heart, I will be found by you, declares the Lord. I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I've driven you, declares the Lord. And I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. False prophets were saying, oh, this won't last long. But if they'd been listening, the people of God knew that it would be 70 years. We don't know how long we'll be here. Thus says the Lord God, when I gather the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they are scattered, and manifest my holiness in them in the sight of the nations, Then they shall dwell in their own land that I gave to my servant Jacob. They shall dwell securely in it. They shall build houses, plant vineyards. They shall dwell securely. When I execute judgment upon all their neighbors who've treated them with contempt, then they will know that I am the Lord their God. Now I'm saying that going back to Israel, going back to the promised land, is like our going to the promised land. That's the comparison I'm making. God will one day gather his people to the land of promise. This will be our final move spiritually. Again, we've talked about things that have affected our places where we live. Talked about these things here. There'll come a time when there will be no more moving. There'll be no more concern about these things here, things that we have to deal with. While we're here, we have to deal with these things. But we depend on God. And let's not allow change to affect the way we look at life. And not retreat, but deal with it. So our final move, God is in our final move. He will be glorified, we know this, and yield our lives to his purpose. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever, my final home. Thank you for listening.